Tonight on Bridge City News, more money will be coming to cities in our province thanks to a new tax being levied against cannabis growers. New peace officers have been fully trained and are ready to hit the streets in Lethbridge. And another shooting at a high school in the United States leaves 2 dead and a few others injured.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge Police Service's first community peace officers have officially completed their training and are ready to hit the streets on their own. 9 CPOs have been appointed by the province. Ainsley O'Reilly explains exactly what the role will be in our community.
Lethbridge will be the only community in the province to have active community peace officers on duty. Thursday was their first day on the job.
It's very, very exciting. They've had their 22 weeks of training, 16 weeks of being with an experienced police officer.
A total of 9 officers have been hired who are confident in their months of preparation.
Feels good. I'm excited. I'm eager. Gone through a lot of training to be here, so I'm excited to get out on the street and start my job.
Very well trained, very knowledgeable, very good with the community, and I'm very excited to have them out here.
Since the provincial budget was released, the UCP government says that they will provide extra training to 400 peace officers who work in fish and wildlife. Now, that is to target rural crime. The 9 officers stationed in Lethbridge will be working within the city.
As of right now, we are just solely posted in one area, which is the downtown area, and I can't speak to any future postings or anything like that. I'm unsure.
CPOs are fully trained police cadets who can do a lot of the same things a police officer can. However, there are differences.
So one of the biggest differences is definitely our criminal code authorities, and then that kind of limits the calls we're going to be attending to.
Lethbridge Police will be recruiting for more CPOs in the near future, with training anticipated at the start of 2020. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Lethbridge Police have charged a 36-year-old man in connection with an assault yesterday morning. Police say a 55-year-old man was stopped at a red light on Mayor McGrath Drive when he was motioned by an unknown male to pull over. When the driver stopped near the Campbell Clinic, he was confronted by a man with a knife who yelled at him and threatened him with that knife. The man drove away without injury. Police were able to find the suspect a short time later. He was taken in along with a knife and 11 prepackaged doses of fentanyl. 36-year-old Stanley Wade standing alone faces many charges, including assault with a weapon, and will appear in court on Monday. Lethbridge Police responded to a pedestrian collision late yesterday afternoon. The investigation revealed that a 13-year-old ran across the intersection at University and Gary Drive when the lights were green and was struck by a southbound vehicle. Injuries were not considered life-threatening. No charges were laid against the driver. Police are reminding pedestrians to always look for and obey traffic signals. A man was arrested in Calgary following multiple collisions involving a cube van that left some police in need of medical attention. Reports say a U-Haul was being driven erratically around 4:30 this morning, and at least 2 police cruisers were hit as they tried to stop the van. Tips from the public helped police locate the van, and the driver was taken into custody. Police do not believe the man was intentionally striking vehicles or trying to harm anyone. Starting next year, municipalities across the province can look forward to a new source of revenue when commercial cannabis producers start paying taxes. The Alberta government says growers will no longer be classified as agricultural businesses and will no longer qualify for a tax exemption. The change will come into effect in the 2020 tax year. The government is not saying how much additional revenue will be created. The tax change does not apply to greenhouse operations or industrial hemp cultivation. Lethbridge was named one of Western Canada's top cities to invest in when it comes to property. Western Investors compiled a list, and Lethbridge came in at number 4 overall. Now, despite a slowdown in Alberta, our economy has been doing quite well the past couple of years, seeing a 5.1% growth. The Conference Board of Canada says their economy will grow at 2.7% next year. They're forecasting 2,700 jobs will be created in the city this year and next. Western Investors says continued growth at the University of Lethbridge and Lethbridge College are significant factors, as are healthcare facilities like the Chinook Hospital and St. Michael's Health Centre. The city is expected to post $2.2 billion in retail sales in 2019, which is up 3.6% from last year. Total housing starts will also increase by 10% to 604 units this year. U of L researchers are studying the underlying biological processes associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease, thanks to almost $300,000 in funding. The money comes from the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories and the Alberta Prion Research Institute.
This is a project that we started a few years ago, and you know, we have made some discoveries, and you know, this is one of the things that we don't necessarily have an end date, because it's a fundamental neuroscience. We have to understand first what things are changing in the brain, and if we know those answers, then we can basically try to find a way to slow down or stop the you know, Alzheimer's disease.
The most important reason for doing research that is fundamental is because at the moment we have no way of slowing down or treating Alzheimer's disease. Understanding exactly how the brain changes as we age and as Alzheimer's disease takes hold will give us targets for future treatments.
One of the big factors related to this is stress, and we're really interested in the effect of noise as a stressor. So people who live near busy highways, by airports and so on, actually show the effects of stress, and that appears to accelerate the onset of a variety of neurological conditions, including Alzheimer's.
According to the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, more than 500,000 people were living with dementia in our country last year, with about 25,000 new cases diagnosed each and every year. The number of people with dementia is expected to rise to around 1 million by the year 2031. The call is out for people interested in becoming a TEDx presenter at the University of Lethbridge in January. The university is now looking for candidates to apply to be a speaker or performer addressing the theme of I am still learning.
Well, we're really excited. This is the first time the University of Lethbridge has hosted a TEDx talk, and it is ideally suited to the university. Our theme is I am still learning. And this is important for the University of Lethbridge. Lifelong learning is a journey, and we encourage our students and alumni, entire community, to continue their lifelong learning journey. And also, it's a great opportunity for the community to share their big ideas, their strokes of brilliance, their performance. There's all sorts of ways to pitch a talk.
Those interested in applying to present at TEDx University of Lethbridge must submit an application form by Wednesday, November the 20th. The town of Coaldale wants your input into the long-term future of the town's pool. Last July, Coaldale Swimming Pool had a serious problem with its filtration system and was shut down. The town held a couple of community engagement sessions to determine the best course of action moving forward financially. Now the town is offering an online survey asking what you'd like to see happen with the pool. The website is coaldale.ca/pool survey and takes around 10 minutes to complete. Information from the survey will be collected and presented to Council at a later date. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants the New Democrats to support his minority government, the Liberals will have to move forward on universal pharmacare and dental coverage.
Just had a meeting with the Prime Minister and we went over some of the priorities. I'm sure it's not a surprise to you all, but I really wanted to encourage the Prime Minister to indicate some things in the throne speech that would show that we could work together. And one of those priorities is universal pharmacare. We believe it has to be public and single payer that covers all Canadians. I also indicated that I would like to see support on dental care. In addition, we talked about a number of other important priorities around affordability, around housing, around real action on the climate crisis. And that means tougher targets, but also means making sure we create jobs. There's a lot of Canadians that feel ignored, they feel like they've been forgotten. They need to know that we are going to make sure that we invest and create jobs in communities that are hard hit.
New research suggests Canada's healthcare system may be coming up a little short. Now that's according to Bacchus Barua, who's the Associate Director of Health Studies at the Fraser Institute. Mr. Barua says that is especially the case when you compare Canada to other countries around the world.
These countries put patients at the center. In Canada, we have a system where essentially we have to adapt to our healthcare system, whereas these other countries say, okay, well, we're really interested in ensuring that patients get timely access to quality care regardless of ability to pay, and let's use the best tools at our disposal to actually get that. And that's the key difference with these other countries that outperform us.
Catch the full interview with Bacchus Barua from the Fraser Institute, along with BCN's Paul Arthur. That's coming up in the second half of our show. 2 inmates from a Saskatoon psychiatric center who were on the large have been recaptured. Police say 29-year-old Kendall Lee Campo and 24-year-old Matthew Michelle were both taken into custody today. In 2010, Campo pleaded guilty to storming a guard station at a jail in Saskatoon with other inmates armed with homemade knives, taking 3 correctional workers hostage. 2 people were seriously injured following a shooting inside of a business in North Toronto earlier today. Paramedics say a woman was transported to hospital with serious injuries. The second victim made his way to hospital with the assistance of another person. Police say the incident occurred inside of the Hercules Moving Company, adding the robbery appeared targeted with no other businesses impacted. Both suspects are believed to have fled the area on foot. No descriptions have been released. The Los Angeles County Fire Department says 2 people were killed and 3 others were injured following a shooting earlier today at a California high school. Police say the incident took place at Saugus High School in the city of Santa Clarita. Authorities were unsure if all of the patients suffered from gunshot wounds. One of the patients was flown to a hospital and the others were transported by ground ambulance. The suspect, a 16-year-old student of the school, is in custody and is also being treated in hospital with a gunshot wound. Officials say he's in grave condition. A store which was the scene of 22 people being killed last August is set to reopen. Walmart in El Paso, Texas, has quietly hired off-duty police officers at its stores and is now open again for business.
I've been there to support them in overcoming what happened on August the 3rd and giving them a sense of hope at the end of this tragic event that happened, that they can get back to some sort of normal life. At the beginning, you could see the hugs and some tears, and now you see some hugs and some smiles and laughter, and so that's really encouraging to see that they've gone through some healing process, just working together side by side.
It was on this day that Nazi Germany bombed the English town of Coventry during the Second World War. Moby Dick was published, and Leonard Bernstein makes his conducting debut. This is Today in History for November the 14th.
November 14th, 1940. One of the most devastating bombing raids during World War II. Hundreds of Nazi Germany's warplanes destroy most of the English town of Coventry. 1851. Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick, the tale about the pursuit of the great white whale, is published. 1889. Inspired by author Jules Verne, Nellie Bly sets out to travel around the world in less than 80 days. Bly, a reporter for the New York World, succeeds, making the trip in 72 days. 1943.
Leonard Bernstein has come out on the platform and will presently lead the Philharmonic Symphony in our national anthem.
Leonard Bernstein makes his conducting debut with the New York Philharmonic. The 25-year-old assistant conductor fills in for the ailing Bruno Walter during a nationally broadcast concert. And 1900. Aaron Copland, one of America's leading composers of the 20th century, is born in New York City. Today in History, November 14th. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Scientists are looking for 10,000 pets for the largest ever study of aging canines. They're hoping the research will shed some light on human longevity as well.
She's a really healthy ager. When we go for walks, people ask if she's a puppy. There are a lot of really good reasons to carry out the dog aging project. People love dogs, and dogs age much more quickly than humans do. They die when they're much younger than we are, and so understanding how to keep dogs healthier longer is going to be good for dogs and good for the people who love dogs. The Dog Aging Project is going to recruit dogs of all ages, all breeds, purebreds and mixed breed dogs, males, females from every region in the country, and our goal is to follow them for the rest of their lives. We are certain that a lot of what we learn about from dogs will apply to humans, and that we can learn about those things much more quickly than we'll be able to learn in humans, where similar studies are going on, but they take decades instead of years.
My research group particularly prefers to study pet dogs as compared to dogs in a laboratory setting, because pet dogs live in diverse environments and eat diverse food and have diverse exercise schedules, very much like their human owners.
There are lots of questions that dog owners have about how to make sure that their dog stays healthy for just as long as possible. We actually have pretty limited idea about things like diet and how diet affects aging in dogs. What's the optimal diet? These are things that we can discover. We can also learn about how exercise and the kind of exercise that dogs do affects how well they age. So there are a lot of ways in which what we learn from the Dog Aging Project can actually give practical help to dog owners and their dogs.
Now, there's a reason why they say dogs are a man's best friend. You gotta love it. Clouds and warmer today, but will that trend continue? Complete weather details are coming up. We had warmer temperatures again today. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near 0. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high expected near 12. A nice weekend is shaping up. Saturday, lots of sunshine again and a high of 7. A mixture of sun and cloud and 14 degrees for Sunday. Monday, lots of blue sky and a high near 11. A cold front moves in on Tuesday, bringing clouds and a high of only 5. Wednesday, flurries with the mercury dropping to 2 degrees. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 4 degrees and an average low of -7. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1953 at 19 degrees, and the record low was a chilly -23 in 1955. Sunrise was at 7:41, sunset at 4:51. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, there's a good chance of showers in Victoria with a high expected near 13. Rain at 13 as well for Vancouver. Lots of cloud cover and a high of 13 in Calgary on Friday. Cloudy and 6 degrees for Edmonton. Overcast and 2 degrees for Regina tomorrow. Mainly cloudy and +1 for Saskatoon. Expect a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of only -5 in Winnipeg. A chance of rain mixed with snow and a high of 2 degrees for Toronto tomorrow. Expect snow showers and a high of +1 in Ottawa. Light flurries and 3 degrees in Montreal tomorrow. Over the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should receive light showers and a high of 4. Rain at 10 degrees is on tap for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A few clouds and 9 degrees for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mainly cloudy day and a high of 5 degrees on Friday. There are concerns that modern technology and machines could push more than 1 million Canadian workers out of jobs. But a new report from RBC Economics says many of those workers could be retrained to fill growing gaps in the healthcare system. The report says it does not necessarily mean every truck driver displaced by an autonomous vehicle will become a paramedic, but those with the proper social and digital skills could readily find new positions. Federal projections estimate that the rapid pace of growth in the healthcare sector seen over the last 10 years will continue over the next decade. The fund manager for the Canada Pension Plan says it earned a net return of 2.3% in the second quarter. The CPP Investment Board says the fund grew to about $409.5 billion. Now that's a gain of almost $9 billion from the previous quarter. It says it earned $9.2 billion in net income from investments. The board's 5-year annualized net return was 8.4%. Its 10-year rate was 8.6%. Sweden Central Bank says that it has sold bonds from Alberta and parts of Australia because it felt the greenhouse gas emissions in both regions were too high. Deputy Governor Martin Floden says the bank will no longer invest in assets from issuers with a large climate footprint, even if the yields were high. Floden recently said that Canada and Australia are countries that are known for good climate work, but greenhouse gas emissions per capita are among the highest in the world. The Alberta government responded by saying that our province has some of the highest environmental standards in the world and that the energy industry is continually improving its environmental footprint. Saskatchewan is getting help from a former prime minister to help strengthen trade relationships and increase exports. The government says it is hiring a firm Stephen Harper is with as they look at opening trade offices in Japan, India, and Singapore. The offices are part of Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe's plan to boost both the provincial economy and Saskatchewan's population. Moe has not revealed the cost of the openings, but said it will be minimal compared to the value of exports. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 14 points today to 16,972. The Dow was down almost 2 points on the day to 27,781. The S&P 500 was up almost 3 points to 3,096. The Nasdaq was down 3 points to 84.79. Oil was down 22 cents on the day to 56.90 per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to $2.64. Gold was up 26 cents to $14.7166 an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $17.03 an ounce. Wheat is at $229 per metric ton, barley's at $227, canola's at $464, and corn is at $277 per metric ton. Live cattle was up 98 cents to $119.28. Feeder cattle was up $1.05 to $146.88. Lean hogs were up 38 cents to $64.08. And the Canadian dollar was up on the day to 75.49 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge was named one of Western Canada's top cities to invest in for property. Western Investor has compiled a list, and Lethbridge came in at number 4 overall. Despite a slowdown in Alberta, our economy has been doing quite well the past couple of years, seeing a 5.1% growth. The Conference Board of Canada says their economy will also grow 2.7% next year. They're forecasting 2,700 jobs being created in the city the remainder of this year and next. Still coming up this hour, an interview with Christian singer and songwriter Brian Dirksen talking about his new Christmas album. And shortly, Paul Arthur chats with Bacchus Barua from the Fraser Institute about the state of our healthcare system. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Mennonite Historical Society of Alberta is holding their fall conference on Saturday, November 16th at the Gem of the West Museum in Coaldale beginning at 1 p.m. Hear about the struggles of conscience in the Mennonite community during the Second World War with guest speaker Conrad Stoes. Registration is $20. For more information, email kenmattis@gmail.com or call 403-929-3604. Come to the Nikayuko Japanese Garden on Friday, November 29th as they kick off the season with their Winter Light Festival, which will run until January 31st. On that evening, the gates will open at 6 p.m. with greetings from sponsors and dignitaries at 7. Admission is $9 for adults, $7 for kids ages 6 to 15, and ticket packages, which include food and drinks, are also available. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. It's the 28th annual Mayor's Christmas Concert on Saturday, December 7th at the Southminster United Church beginning at 7 p.m. Enjoy your favorite Christmas carols performed by the Lethbridge Community Silver and Gold Bands with special guests École Agnes Davidson Senior and Junior Choirs. Come take part in this annual tradition and bring along a donation in support of the Lethbridge Food Bank and Interfaith Food Bank's Christmas Hope campaign. For more information and to purchase tickets, visit lcbs.yapcity.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A new study has found that despite spending more on health care than most other developed countries with universal coverage, Canada has a relatively short supply of doctors and hospital beds and the longest wait times. Joining me to discuss this is Bacchus Barua. He is the Associate Director, Health Policy Studies with the Fraser Institute and one of the co-authors of the study, Comparing Performance of Universal Healthcare Countries 2019. Good to have you with us again, Bacchus. Can you give us a snapshot of how you went about with this study, comparing Canada with 28 other universal healthcare systems in high-income countries?
Well, you know, Paul, healthcare is incredibly important for Canadians, and therefore it's also important for us to consistently gauge how well that system is actually performing. One of the ways that we can do it is by using a value for money approach, which is, as an economist, that's what we tend to do. And essentially it's trying to figure out how much money we're putting into the system and what we're actually getting out of it. So as you said, we looked at 28 countries around the world with universal healthcare. So there's not a question of universal healthcare or not. We looked at 48 indicators, on the one hand on looking at spending, and on the other hand in terms of results, trying to look at things like the availability of resources, the utilization of resources, timely access to care, and the quality of those services that are delivered.
Okay, so where did Canada rank when it comes to how much we're spending on health care compared to the other countries?
Well, in terms of spending, we're actually right at the top. When we look at spending as a percentage of GDP, we rank second highest after adjusting for age. And we also rank 10th highest on a per capita basis, which is, looks better than the GDP figure, but still well above the average for the OECD countries amongst the 28 that we're looking at. So one thing's clear that, if we do have issues with our healthcare system, it's certainly not a result of spending.
Okay, that's important to note. Something needs to switch here somewhere. How did Canada do with the availability of resources category? Do we have enough medical professionals? Do we have enough medical equipment like acute care beds or MRIs, that sort of thing?
Well, unfortunately, we're really not seeing the spending translate into the availability of resources. Just for example, In terms of physicians per capita, we're right at the bottom of the pack, ranking 26th out of 28 for the ratio of physicians per capita. We do a little bit better in terms of MRIs and CT scanners, ranking about 21st. But then again, when we look at acute care beds, we're back at the bottom at about 26 out of 27. And the thing is, these figures really help us understand why we have the issues that we routinely see in the newspapers. Issues like, individuals not being able to get a doctor, issues like individuals having to wait for a hospital bed. Well, it's no wonder. We actually have some of the fewest doctors in the world, and we have some of the lowest ratio of hospital beds in the world as well.
So I guess the question is why, right? I mean, if we're spending that much money, why are we short on physicians and in some cases certain types of equipment? I mean, what are other countries doing differently than we are, to get better results?
Well, there are a lot of different areas that we can look at performance. We're doing poorly in terms of access, and we do remarkably poorly in terms of timeliness of care, and we kind of do across the spectrum in terms of utilization and quality. But overall, absolutely, there are a number of other countries with universal healthcare that outperform us on a number of these metrics. And the key difference is that they do universal healthcare differently. Some of the things that they do is they partner and embrace the private sector as either a partner to deliver the universal healthcare promise or as an alternative. They generally expect patients to share in the cost of treatment to sort of temper demand, of course, without ever trying to make sure that it's never a financial burden. So you have exemptions for vulnerable populations, and they fund the hospitals differently. They fund the hospitals based on activity, trying to incentivize them to actually treat patients. Whereas in Canada, because of the monopolistic structure that we have, we're still funding hospitals based on global budgets, which makes hospitals really think of patients as a cost that are eating into this budget. Now, of course, it's not like any one of these things will magically fix our healthcare system, but it is important to remember that when we look at countries that outperform us on these indicators, they do universal healthcare very differently.
Okay, yeah, it's not that they don't have universal health care, they just, like you say, do it differently. I think we have this innate fear here somehow that we're going to end up like the U.S. as soon as we mention the word private/public. And I think somehow we maybe have to get over that. And I think there is maybe a move underfoot here in Canada that's beginning to change some minds, and we continue to come back to this when we look at, wow, how much we're spending and how little bang we're getting for the buck. And, we see these line items in every provincial budget going up and up, closer to 50% of the budget going toward healthcare, and still long lineups. So hopefully some of that will begin to change when we look at countries, on this list, if it's a Sweden or a Switzerland, Great Britain, a UK. We see these are not countries that leave patients behind. They're not, they're actually fairly socialistic countries, and they're having a better bang for the buck. So hopefully something begins to change. Now, you have a category labeled use of resources. So for the resources that we do have, how well and how frequently are we making use of these?
Well, the answer to that is a little bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it does seem that we're trying to use some of our resources, some of our limited resources to the best of our ability. So we do have a higher rate of utilization for things like consultations with the general practitioner. But on the other hand, we do very, very poorly in terms of things like the amount of hospital activity. We're, again, ranking close to the bottom of the pack over there. And we're somewhere in the middle when it comes to MRIs and CT scans per scanner. So we're trying to reuse the resources as best as we can, but obviously we're sort of facing a little bit of a bottleneck where a lot of people are trying to access their family doctors, trying to get into the hospitals to get treated, but obviously what we're seeing from the data is the number of services actually provided is not matching up, and it's no wonder therefore that we see the long wait times that we routinely do in Canada. So a bit of a mixed bag in terms of utilization.
Yeah. Any thoughts on how that could get fixed short term, or is that again more of a long term, gradual kind of a change?
Well, it's always good to try and use your resources as efficiently as possible, but that only goes to a certain limit. At some point, you have to contend with the fact that we do have the lowest ratios of physicians per capita. One of the lowest ratios of physicians per capita. And again, we're right at the bottom of the pack when it comes to hospital beds per capita. So, we can try as best as we can to use these resources efficiently. But at some point of time, we actually have to think about whether these resources are actually sufficient for Canadians.
Do you know off the top of your head, I know the study didn't focus on that, but we do hear sometimes of a brain drain going south of the border. Is that part of it? Again, our physicians here, they are business people. They do charge the various provincial governments for the services. It's not free in that sense, right? But there's a cap, I think, that we kind of place on that, on those services as compared to other countries like the U.S. Is that where we're losing physicians towards, or?
We haven't looked at it in this particular study, but there is a study I did a couple of years ago that was looking at the physician supply, and we were able to tease out a little bit of what this brain drain was. And it is there, but it is a small portion of our problem. The main problem that we have is that in the early 1990s there were government controls that came in on the number of physicians who are actually trained in Canada, the number of residencies that are there in Canada, and our reliance on foreign trained doctors. The result was essentially a plateauing of our ratio of physicians per capita, whereas the rest of the world continued to develop as they understood that physicians are a vital and important part of our healthcare system. The result is a situation where right now, even though we're training physicians, sometimes the physicians who are graduating aren't able to actually get a job within Canada. So, it's a complex system of policies that are really resulting in the fact that, on the one hand, not enough physicians are being trained, but even if they are trained and even if they do graduate, sometimes they have difficulty actually getting a job in Canada. But that's not what we looked at in this particular study.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens with that down the road. Something needs to change there, of course, we have a need for them, so, we should be able to get them some jobs, right? Now, Canada didn't score particularly well in the category of access to resources. Can you explain what that means and why we're having trouble getting access to healthcare resources that we need in a timely manner?
Well, I think one of the key ways that the Canadians are concerned about their healthcare system is the timeliness of care. I don't think I need to, it comes as a surprise to anyone that we have some of the longest wait times in the developed world. But the fact of the matter is that, it's not a necessary consequence of having a universal healthcare system. Some of the indicators that we look at in this particular study is looking at other countries with universal healthcare, and Canada is routinely right at the bottom of the pack when it comes to timeliness of care. For example, when it comes to the percentage of patients who had to wait 2 weeks or longer to see a specialist, Canada's right at the bottom. Another indicator that's looking at the percentage of patients who waited 4 months or more for treatment, again, right at the bottom. And just to give you a little bit of context about these numbers, the percentage of patients who were waiting longer than 4 months to see a specialist was 18% in Canada. By contrast, in Germany, that percentage was 0. There were no patients who reported waiting as long. And even if we look at other countries and other systems, looking at countries like the Netherlands and Switzerland, the numbers over there are maybe 7 to 8% who had to wait as long. Nothing like the sort of wait times that we see in Canada. So it's not a necessary consequence of having universal healthcare, but it is certainly a consequence of the way that we do universal healthcare.
And I understand that cost was also one of the reasons, of several reasons for hindering patients from getting care in a timely manner. Any examples of that you could share with us?
Well, cost is a little bit more complex. Over here, we're trying to measure whether cost was a barrier in terms of access to care. Again, that's another way of thinking about access. And I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised that even in Canada, we're sort of in the middle of the pack, despite the fact that we have a well-lauded universal healthcare system. Now, I would say some of the primary reasons why we're not performing at the top of that has to do with the cost that sometimes patients incur when they need to access pharmaceuticals or when they need to access dental or vision care. But we're also not at the top when it comes to things like accessing a medical doctor. Again, when we look at countries like Germany and Sweden and the Netherlands, they actually routinely outperform Canada on all those indicators. They also cover pharmacare, but they also embrace the private sector. I think all of these other countries have a better understanding of trying to use the best tools at your disposal and putting in the regulations you need to ensure that patients are protected. It's only in Canada where we think that government is the only answer, and we're sort of paying the price for that.
Yeah, so our mindset somehow has to change to say, hey, let's do something similar here. If it's working over there, good chance it's going to do something good here too. What about the category of quality and clinical performance? Can you tell us a bit more about that? What's included in this category, and how did we do?
Sure. Quality is obviously a vital part of trying to assess how well our healthcare system is doing. But it's also really important for us to make sure that we're not conflating this with general health. Although that's the ultimate goal of any healthcare system, general indicators of health status like life expectancy can be affected by a variety of factors, including things like genetics, including things like pollution, activity, etc., which are really outside the purview of the healthcare system. So when we're looking at quality and clinical performance, we want to talk about how well is the healthcare system actually doing at improving the health of patients. So some of the indicators that we look at are showing that we're actually doing quite well. So when we look at, for example, survival of breast cancer, we're ranked 6th, very, very well. Not the top, but better than most of the other countries. We're sort of in the middle of the pack when it comes to stroke survival rates, but then we're at the bottom of the pack when it comes to things like obstetric trauma. We have some of the highest rates of obstetric trauma amongst the countries that we can compare ourselves with. So again, a little bit of a mixed bag, a couple of bright spots, and essentially it's sort of telling us that our healthcare system is good when somebody has a crisis. But unfortunately, everybody else is sort of left to fend for themselves or try and find healthcare outside of our borders.
Okay. Well, I guess the question is, what can we do to improve our healthcare performance? What can we learn from these other nations who are doing better? And you touched on it earlier, but refresh us here again. Are some of these countries allowing for some, private financing for medically necessary services, that sort of thing?
The private sector is clearly one of the key ingredients in better performance, but it's not the only difference. Routinely, when we look at countries that are outperforming us, and these are countries including Switzerland, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Australia, again, all countries with universal healthcare, they do 3 things differently. They have a different attitude towards the private sector. They either embrace them as a partner to deliver universal healthcare, or they use it as a pressure valve to say, okay, well, when the public healthcare system is not attending to patients, you have an alternative. They expect patients to share in the cost of treatment. This is not to say that patients have to completely fend for themselves, but these are generally things like having a small deductible, asking patients to pay 10% of the cost of their treatment, and of course with an annual limit to make sure that it's never a financial burden, and with exemptions for certain populations, pregnant mothers, for example, diabetics, to ensure that they're not overly burdened by these co-payments. And they fund their hospitals differently. They incentivize the hospital to actually treat patients, so that every time a patient goes into the hospital actually gets funding, which again is related to the fact that they have extra capacity because they're private insurers. Ultimately, the key difference I find is that these countries put patients at the center. In Canada, we have a system where essentially we have to adapt to our healthcare system, whereas these other countries say, okay, well, we're really interested in ensuring that patients get timely access to quality care regardless of ability to pay, and let's use the best tools at our disposal to actually get that. And that's the key difference with these other countries that outperform us.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Those are 3 key issues, again, that maybe we need to adjust our Canadian mindset to say, hey, let's maybe give that a shot. Because again, as you point out in the study, we're not getting a real good bang for our buck. And so we need to change some things in our system. And again, in our current political climate, realistically speaking, we have a minority government in place. The odds of seeing any significant changes real soon, probably not super high. But do you think maybe over the next few years we could see some changes?
I'm definitely not a political pundit, but I can say that, studying this subject for the last 10 years, it seems like regardless of which government's in power, the general attitude seems to be to pump more money into the system. If we actually look at the data, we can clearly see that money is not the problem. We're actually spending quite a lot on our healthcare system. Unfortunately, I don't really see anyone with the real courage to actually attend to the policy reform that would enable us to use the policies that are pursued in countries that are more successful than we are. Until that happens, I don't really see change on the horizon. But there is one silver lining, and that's, I think, Canadians actually getting a better understanding of what's out there, and actually, if something does happen, it'll come from the ground up. And I think I'm optimistic about Canadians actually understanding how this can actually be done better in the future.
Really appreciate you taking the time for us here today, Bacchus.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It may seem early to be talking about Christmas, but the day is fast approaching. I know, because my kids have me counting down the days. So we're privileged today to be joined by Brian Dirksen. He is a father of 6, a pastor, a songwriter, an award-winning recording artist. I think most of you know who he is. And he's about to release a Christmas album called The Heart of Christmas. So welcome, Brian. So good to have you on with us today.
So good to be here.
Well, you've been at this for, I think, 30-some years. Tell us about your new album. I did listen to it, loved it.
Well, it was a long time in coming. You know, the record label has been pestering me for like 15 years. Brian, when are you going to do a Christmas album? And my response was, when I have something to say. You know, there's a lot of Christmas music out there, and it seems like a lot of people recording the same songs over and over again. And I'm a songwriter, so I wanted to wait until I had a body of work that told the Christmas story from my perspective. So, you know, and about 2 years ago, my wife, it was in the middle of summer, the heat of summer, and she looked at me and said, "It's time." And she went upstairs, got a box of decorations, came into my office, set up Christmas decorations, you know, the peace on earth sign and Christ and all of this. And I'm like, okay. And she looks at me, get to work. So away I went, started writing new Christmas songs.
Oh, that is really interesting. Yeah, you could tell, you know, having listened to the album, had the opportunity to do that, and yeah, you could tell there's a songwriter at work here, some deep lyrics there, which I really appreciate. Like you say, I mean, it's fun to have, you know, the Jingle Bell songs, whatever, they're okay, I guess, but this is about Jesus. It's his day, right? So what do you feel is the heart of Christmas?
Well, obviously the story of Jesus and his birth, and the invitation that brings to all of us to receive love, to give love, to walk with those who need love. And for me, the heart of Christmas is this Emmanuel, God with us, but that he's with all of us, those that are in need, those of us in all parts of culture, you know, that we need that message. And I think Jesus is that presence in our life, and that to me is the heart of Christmas.
Well said. Any thoughts on how to keep Christ at the center of it all? You know, I mean, once this kicks into full gear, I mean, it's such a busy time of the year. I have trouble myself, you know, just getting off focus, and you got to, you know, rein yourself back in, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing is like when, and I have 2 special needs boys, and for one of them in particular, who's not very verbal, but his birthday's a big deal, okay? So getting ready for somebody's birthday is a big deal. And one of the things I did with our children is, you know, this is the birth of Christ. It's like celebrating a birthday. So yeah, we do have to get some preparations, you know, we decorate, we do that. But the point of it isn't all of what we're doing, is to honor that person, so I think, you know, yes, there's preparations, but it's keeping the focus on Christ, keeping the focus on welcoming him and honoring him. And we also do that by the way we love each other, right? Even, you know, even giving a gift to somebody else can be a way of honoring Christ, because we are recognizing who that person is, and we're loving them and acknowledging that we know them, right? But it is tricky. There's no perfect way of doing it.
I mean, I think we sometimes just need to simply, I guess, you know, state the obvious in that sense, even around a, you know, supper table with the family. Do you ever do that? You know, you sit down with the kids and say, you know, what do you think? What is Christmas about? And you actually talk it through to, you know, audibly remind each other what it's about.
Yeah, and we did that a lot, and when the kids were younger, we would be constantly retelling the Christmas story, you know, and then get the kids involved in telling the Christmas story. And really all for me, my album, The Heart of Christmas, is now a chance for me to tell that story in song.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and it is well done. Again, the album, The Heart of Christmas, I encourage people to check it out. What are some of your favorite Christmas memories looking back over your life?
Well, for me, the Christmas tree, the setting up of the Christmas tree, and then putting on vinyl records. I'm a vinyl record guy. Hey, hey, look, we
Okay.
actually made this.
I
as a
remember that
vinyl
too.
record.
Oh yeah, oh, that's great.
But I would put on some of the classic vinyl records, and I would turn off all the lights, and I would look at the Christmas tree, and I would listen to the Christmas songs. And I was always kind of like that. I wanted, even as a child, I knew this was celebrating the birth of Christ, and so I knew, you know, I would, you know, you have songs like Silver Bells, Silver Bells, it's Christmas time in the city. But I could do that for a song or two, but then I wanted to get back to Jesus, right? Like, okay, what is this about? And, you know, so definitely my favorite Christmas memories are in the dark, but with the lights on the tree. And that whole process of the days before Christmas, of just really entering into the spirit of it. And it's funny because in some ways now I go, oh, that really connects with what I do now. And I was in essence doing that as a boy. I was just tuned into that. Yeah, and then there's certain, you know, dishes that my mom would make, certain food things that would happen only at Christmas. This type of sausage roll that we would have every Christmas Eve, and so it's a combination of music, visual, food, and really worshiping Christ together as a family and as a community of faith.
Yeah, it stirs up warm feelings in that sense, doesn't it? However, as you point out, actually in your album, another aspect of Christmas is the fact that for many it can be a very lonely time of the year. You speak of dark, you know, and there's the Christmas, you know, tree with the lights on it. You know, especially for those who have lost a loved one, and your album has a song called Saddest Season. Tell us about that a bit.
Well, just over 6 years ago, my mom passed away, and my mom was kind of like, in some ways, the beating heart of Christmas, because she was the one preparing the food, really being very present for all of us, her children, her grandchildren. And that was such a hard Christmas. And I remember we somehow managed to get through Christmas Day, and it was the end of the day. We cleaned up the dishes, and I walked over to the piano, and my hands fell on this G major 7 kind of wistful chord, and this song just tumbled out of me. Christmas is the saddest season. Close friends and families gather and try not to mourn the missing. And this feeling of like how when you love deeply, when you lose, like this holiday of Christmas gets, like, to quote a friend of mine, Carly Rearson, it's stained with grief. Like, it's still the same thing, but there's now a stain on it of grief, like it impacts. And I think, you know, we have of the faith persuasion, we believe in the death and the resurrection of Christ, and we believe ultimately in our resurrection. So we have hope, but that does not mitigate or lessen that feeling of grief in that season. In any way, in some ways, it heightens it, because we feel like we're now separated from that loved one, right? They may be on the other side, but we can't experience their love or their care. So yeah, so I wrote that song and then just kind of set it aside. And my wife was like, Joyce was like, you have to include this on the album because there's a lot of people who can relate to it.
A lot of people need to hear that song. You know, like I said, it kind of goes hand in hand. It's that double-edged sword. There's always that tension between the joy and the grief. Yeah, I lost my mom about a year ago, and it's very different Christmas.
And it's almost like for people who've lost loved ones, Christmas is the hardest of all, because it's the most close time of all. So then it becomes the hardest.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What about the commercialization of Christmas? I mean, do we spend way too much on gifts? You know, big picture compared to so many developing countries. Yeah, we do. You know, is there a different or a better way to do things? Any thoughts on that briefly?
Well, I mean, I think we've always tried to both know and love and gift according to who the person is, but always do things every year that are about justice and the poor, and you know, do both. Like sometimes I think some people say, no, we shouldn't give each other gifts at all. We should just, and I think, well, See, the thing is, sometimes when we talk about loving God, we have to remember that the first way we express our love for God is loving those that are right around us, you know, loving our neighbor as ourselves. And who's our closest neighbor but our family? But, you know, really, truly. So let's love them well, but let's not forget the poor, as it says in the gospel. Let's find ways to give. I mean, the crazy thing is, of course, my wife and I are trying to be givers all year. You know, we give to church and to charities and to ministries all year long. So it's not like Christmas we have to try and catch up. But we do need to do something. And it's a tension. You described it well. There is no way of getting out of that tension between commercialization and the meaning of it, Christmas. And we just try and walk through that with grace.
Well, again, The Heart of Christmas, the name of your album, it is about Jesus, and you're passionate about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Can you share a little bit of your experience with music? I mean, can music touch people's lives to the extent of actually bringing them into a relationship with their creator? So people put on, you know, a vinyl album or a CD, or they listen to an MP3. Can it actually be that powerful, you think?
Absolutely, and I've had so many letters and stories over the years. You know, I have songs like, even like a song like Creation Calls, which is about the beauty of creation, and the chorus, it goes, how can I say there is no God when all around creation calls? And I remember back in the day when I went to take my special needs son for an award to the video store to sign out a DVD. And I present my video store card to the video store clerk, and she looks up at me and goes, that's so weird. And I go, what's weird? She goes, well, you've got the same name as this kind of name I can't pronounce, but he's a music guy, and he's got a song on YouTube. It's all about the beauty of creation, and when I watch it, I weep, and I'm not a person of faith, but I'm being drawn, and that's so weird that you have the same name as that guy. And I'm like, I'm that guy.
That's great.
I'm that guy. That was me singing that song, and she gets all wide-eyed. And it was just beautiful to hear her story without any, you know, just the trigger of the name, that she was being drawn just through the power of a song and something in the song that she could relate to. So music is a way to the heart, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a conduit for the Spirit of God to reach through and touch people. Everybody loves music. Now, and there's so many people, you know, going through difficult times. And a number of years ago, you went through a winter season, you know, darkness, some struggles. You say you almost lost faith in God. So you can relate to people struggling with this as well, right? So, I mean, there's people watching right now who may be going through a very similar season. What advice would you have for them?
Spring will return. Sometimes winter is very long, and I'm speaking metaphorically now, in our souls. But I think I have a song from an old project called Will You Love Me in the Winter, which is about this heart cry, I think, in the heart of every human being, is when I can't produce, when I can't generate anything, am I still worthy of being loved? And having, for me, special needs sons has really illustrated that. They can't produce according to the world, but I love them so completely. So my just gentle advice to anybody who's going through that is trust deeply that you are loved, and let the love bring back that spring, that new life, that you know, in time it will come. For me, it took some time, but it will come. And you know, and then I think music can help with that. I think other people of faith, surrounding yourself with other people who are good at that, have faith in God, but also are good at loving and listening to you. And be patient.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, we need people around us, people of faith around us. You mentioned how important, of course, your wife was to you in supporting you during this very difficult time. Yeah, absolutely key. And then again, music can help us so much. Tell us about your upcoming concert tour, speaking of music. I see you're going to be coming to Southern Alberta, concert in Medicine Hat. I believe it's December 12th, and then Taber, December 13th. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, we're really excited. It's a partnership with a fellow named Tim Neufeld from Tim and the Glory Boys, and myself and my band, and we're doing Heart of Christmas, sharing the heart, sharing the songs. We'll sing a few of my kind of classic worship songs that people know and love, and it's my full band. And we're going to go throughout Alberta and share the story in the heart of Christmas. And we're pumped. We're coming to Southern Alberta.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I'm going to try to get out to this one in Taber, hopefully. Well, I guess it's longer to drive Medicine Hat, but Medicine Hat's a great place too. So where can people buy tickets for this concert tour, and where can they actually buy the Heart of Christmas album?
Well, if they go to just briandirksen.com, if you click on the events link, then it drops down a menu, and all of the events in Alberta are listed, and you can go right through there, buy tickets. And if you're briandirksen.com, if you click on the shop link, you can get CDs, vinyl records, you can even buy a digital download, and you can support artists like me and others instead of supporting mega corporations like Apple by buying it straight from us. It helps us pay for our production costs. And my wife and I would love to ship you a CD or a vinyl record right to your door. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, briandirksen.com. Hey, appreciate the time, Brian, today for sharing with us here, and just appreciate your heart for communicating the heart of Christ. Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, that's great, isn't it? Brian Dirksen, award-winning recording artist. Do check out the album Heart of Christmas, briandirksen.com. On behalf of all of us at Bridge City News, thank you so much for watching.